business and the SDGs. When these global sustainable development goals were adopted 1.5 years ago, the conviction was widespread that companies that bring their business in line with these SDGs will find opportunities, that they will even be leaders of tomorrow. But how can this exactly be done? What does it mean to bring your business in line with SDGs, and where are the obstacles? These two basic but essential questions are basically what we're going to talk about today. I'm glad you're all here. Let's get started. I'm happy to give the floor now to Matthias Leuenberger. He is the Novartis delegate for Switzerland. For a welcome note, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Global Compact Network Switzerland, colleagues, welcome to Basel, welcome to Novartis, welcome to the campus. On this remarkable day, the weather in Basel is actually always like this. It's no exception. So I have the great pleasure and the privilege of opening today's stakeholder debate about the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As we all know, big and world-spanning ideas such as the UN's SDGs can only become real if we act on a local level. The opposite is equally true. If big ideas are discarded by world leaders, local efforts may end up being fruitless, irrespective of how well-meant they are. We need both grand ideas that have the support of leading governments and international bodies, as well as the willingness of societies around the world to put these ideas into practice. Most importantly, concerted action is needed. This is because there is no single societal force that could solve any of the most pressing global problems on its own, be it climate change, migration, hunger, poverty, or disease. We can only succeed if governments, businesses, NGOs, and other stakeholders work together and, what in my mind is crucially important, perceive each other as partners, each equipped with its own specific skills. From the standpoint of Novartis, big challenges such as public health care need to be tackled on a global scale and from various angles. At Novartis, this is reflected both in our business and our corporate responsibility strategy. As a science-based healthcare company, we not only strive to develop innovative drugs, we also aim to reach as many patients as possible. This also includes our various philanthropic and social business initiatives, which are part of our strategic mission. Yet, to live up to our strategy, it is paramount that we bring together the best and the most talented people from all domains in the healthcare sector, be it pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, healthcare organizations, governments, to name but a few. No single healthcare player is equipped to address these gigantic tasks ahead. Partnerships are essential if we are to tackle the double whammy of demographic change and spiraling healthcare costs. When the United Nations formulated the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, which include 13 individual healthcare-related targets under SDG 3, they were fully aware that all players need to join in the action to achieve these objectives, an element so important it was defined as a goal in its own right, SDG 17. As a consequence, the United Nations called, and rightly so, for a revitalized global partnership that brings together governments, the private sector, and civil society, including NGOs and volunteers. Through our long commitment to helping patients in the world's poorest regions, Novartis is familiar with the difficulties on the ground, and we know that partnerships and science-based innovation are crucial if we are to make a difference. In fact, none of our corporate responsibility efforts would have been feasible without partners. When our predecessor company, Ciba-Geigy, started its first project in the 1960s in Tanzania, it worked together with the local government to build a small training facility for aspiring healthcare professionals. We have kept up this partnership ever since, transforming the Ifakara Institute into one of the leading healthcare training centers in Tanzania and all of East Africa. Out of these humble beginnings, Novartis has continually broadened its activities, first centering on leprosy and later on malaria, cancer, and now in a wide variety of non-communicable diseases, always closely working with the global and local enablers, be it the WHO, individual governments, and NGOs. Along the way, we also joined the UN Global Compact back in 2001, showing our determination to contribute to a fair globalization. Ladies and gentlemen, Novartis does not only have the innovation power and industrial capabilities to bring drugs to patients in need. We believe we have the right attitude as well. We are in for the long haul, and we are open and willing to learn from our partners. We also want to engage in a fruitful dialogue, also involving difficult topics for which there are no easy answers, such as IP, pricing, and research into neglected diseases. Since we started our leprosy program with the WHO at the turn of the century, we have reached more than 6 million patients. We have also provided more than 800 million doses of our malaria treatment Coartem without profit to patients in need as part of our malaria initiative, in which we are working with many local and international partners such as the Medicines for Malaria Venture. At the same time, we are also pushing our research to develop new malaria treatments in order to keep this tropical disease in check, which kills more than 400,000 people every year. Now, as part of our Novartis Access Initiative, we are working with governments and local NGOs to help patients suffering from chronic diseases in developing countries, providing 15 treatments for a price of $1 per treatment per month. For this reason, SDG 17, in our view, is as important as SDG 3, as the one cannot go without the other. Coupled with our willingness to enter into a debate with our partners, both SDGs are essential if we want to make the world a better, safer, and healthier place. With this, I would like to close my introduction, and I thank you for your attention, and I hand over back to Mr. Ammann. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias Leuenberger. I won't be long. I'll hand right over to Antonio Hautli, the Senior Program Leader of Global Compact Network, Switzerland. Please.
Thank you very much to Novartis to host us today. You are one of the founding members of the UN Global Compact and from the early beginning also strongly engaged in the Swiss Global Compact network. A global compact for sustainable development. SDGs, the new business agenda. If I would ask this question, or if I ask this question to an SME, which I met yesterday evening in Lucerne at a podium, they were for surely not saying, yes, that's my agenda. They would ask, what are the SDGs? What about the SDGs in the private sector in Switzerland? As we have heard, and for that stands the UN Global Compact and our local network, they are very important because they give some guidelines we didn't have before. And to have an international agreement on where we want to go is a very important acknowledging internationally that we are all in the same boat. And as Kofi Annan said, there is no plan B because there is no planet B. We got this planet lent from our grandchildren. And we have to hand it over so that they may live in a decent way also in 10 generations from now. I just give you a small video produced by our network which wants to show this.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I just turned 9 and I love my school. And my favorite subjects are science and art. Sometimes I get scared when I watch the news and I see that not all people have food on the table and a safe home like me. I am sad that some children cannot go to school. Maybe they don't have time for school because they work hard. Or maybe they're not allowed to go to school because they're girls, just because they're girls like me. I have seen on TV cities destroyed by heavy winds and too much rain, or fields with no rain at all. Climate change, my teacher says. I am worried. But my family promised me that people and companies around the world are trying to do something about this. They say when I grow up and these clothes fit me, the world will be a better place if we all work together. When these clothes fit me, there will be no more poverty. And boys and girls will be equal. All children will go to school. And their parents will have good jobs. We will be able to breathe the fresh air no matter where we live. We will all have access to clean water. And there will be peace all over. Our world can change because we have the Sustainable Development Goals. Businesses and governments and people everywhere are working to achieve them. I believe we can do this together. If you keep your promise, when these clothes fit me, I will start my first job somewhere that was part of making the world a better place. Will it be your business?
One may say quite pathetic, not realistic, but we have no other choice if we want to go forward, and we are committed, and that's why you are here, to change something for the positive in this world. And it's our duty to do it very pragmatically and in the best way we are able to do it. And that's why we're here together today, to hear and listen what we can learn from each other, and maybe also to plan some further steps. The approach of the UN Global Compact is double-based. On the one hand, it's clear the 10 principles show the basic behaviors of a company, based on the 4 pillars of human rights, ILO norms, the labor issues, the Paris Agenda with the environment, and the anti-corruption principles. To achieve them, it needs also a change of perspective. Some companies already did. Some are on the way, and some have to discover it. But even this is not enough. I met 2 weeks ago a group of church professionals at a visit at Glencore in Zug, and it was very interesting to discuss with Glencore and them, and they were asking me to say what we as Young Global Compact are expecting from a company like Glencore. And in the discussion I said, and what's about the behavior of ourselves? And I was asking the plenary, who is planning a flight for going to vacation this year? It was more of half of the audience who did it. So it's also about our own behavior in daily life, in daily business. How can we improve? Because we have to change also certain patterns. It's clear we want to help local business and global business. And in my eyes, the SDGs are a huge chance and a challenge at the same time. We have to look at our supply chain, at our operations, and last but not least, the whole investment issue. Because the financial sector and the investments of private and companies will make a big, big difference and will have the most impact and the most leverage, even more than practical operations. So, for me, the SDGs for companies are on the one side an analytical framework for critical reflection and innovation. And we would like to help to gather together with you as companies, with the public sector, with NGOs involved, to look what can we improve, where are possibilities we can become better together. But there is also a huge business opportunity and a challenge. Climate change is influencing strongly your business operations in several places, but there is also an opportunity with the new technologies to find solutions we even don't think at the moment. And it may be, third one, a business model for startups, for companies, for parts of large companies who say, okay, let's go to the 17 goals and analyze where are the big challenges of this humanity. Do we, from our knowledge, from our know-how, from our networks, have new possibilities to develop new solutions together? The UN Global Compact, together with other networks like World Business Council for Sustainable Development in Switzerland, together with EPU, with many of you present here, we want to deliver services, deliver instruments like the Sdg Compact, which probably also Michael will speak about, to look what we can do, what we can improve. And in the new toolbox, which the members of the UN Global Compact just got yesterday in a letter from Lise Kingo, signed also by myself, where we propose on an international level different activities. We as Swiss Local Network will start SDG Tour de Suisse. The idea is to bring out these ideas in local small cities from La Chaux-de-Fonds to Lugano to discuss this and to make the agenda known, because we need everybody in the boat. And we also need to have critical dialogue on SDGs and how to implement them, because not everybody agrees with them. As I said at the General Assembly, some are suspicious whether this is just a new model from business to get new business opportunities to make profit. And we have to make sure that we are really serious about it and that we bring companies, private sector, etc. on board and be critical on the output and outcome in the long run. So I'm convinced there is still a lot to be done. We will and we want, as business, become part of the solution, and we will hear some of this afternoon. But we need also to listen to the needs globally. And there are many of signals who are quite negative. What is happening in the Near East is quite difficult. What I have experienced in the south of India, end of April, is quite frightening, because still there are hundreds, thousands and millions of people working in formal factories controlled by us, even Global Compact, and there is bonded labor we are not able to see. It's a fact, it's not just like that, and it's not possible for a company to resolve the problem by its own. So it needs new approaches and new analysis. And that's the consequences. We as business have to be involved in open dialogue, in sharing and learnings for best practices. One example is this afternoon, but we will have other events closed and open within our network and on a global level. So SDGs, in fact, are part of a new business agenda, in my views. It's still very basic and practical to do the first, the second and the third step. And companies like Novartis may be much more advanced than an SME, but it does not mean that an SME can't contribute. And another important part are regions, are cities. Braneo is going in these directions. Politics are very important in the discussion that we can find solutions for the long run. So To finish, I would like to invite you to contribute the best way you can, to share in, to come in, look for best practices and be very pragmatic in the implementation. Not a theoretical discussion will bring the solutions, it's necessary too, but at the end, what counts is the practical thing. And that's why another instrument, and I finish with that, last minute, Sustainable Development Goals, the Global Opportunity Explorer is an instrument produced by UN Global Compact and other partners, and then I invite to bring and join in your best examples on this platform.
What if we told you a world of sustainable innovation is right at your fingertips? Introducing the Global Opportunity Explorer, a digital platform which takes you to some of the most innovative solutions around the globe that help reach the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Built on more than 5 years of research and dialogue with business leaders, it features hundreds of solutions within everything from food and fashion to energy and education, and dozens of new markets addressing global risks such as rising inequality and lack of fresh water. It is where you can connect the dots between solutions for real impact and discover new business opportunities at the edges of existing markets. But the Global Opportunity Explorer is far from finished. It relies on continuous co-creation and crowdsourcing. Everyone, including you, can contribute new solutions and ideas and help expand the pool of incredible innovation and insights for a greener and fairer world. Join us today to build a sustainable world of tomorrow.
So let's make global goals local business. And the final objective is not business, but is mankind, is us. We want to be proud of what we are doing, what we are achieving. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to contribute as large, as small business, as public and private sector. So I'm looking forward to the discussion of this afternoon and for further collaboration within our network, together with all networks, companies, and civil society and public administration. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to introduce Michael Gerber, Ambassador, Swiss Special Envoy for Global Sustainable Development at the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. He will talk about SDG 3, health. Please.
I would like to start with a picture that you might have seen before, because that's the basis of the whole 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The new definition of sustainable development, we could say. It is about the 3 dimensions of sustainable development as you know them for a long time, since the 80s, since the Brundtland report: planet, people, prosperity, environmental, economic and social dimensions. And with this agenda, 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the world, the member states of the United Nations, for the first time have acknowledged that it's not just about these 3 dimensions when really implementing goals and a respective agenda. It's also about peace, a very important enabler of sustainable development. I would even say a prerequisite of sustainable development. And that was the first time that it really happened to work out in the United Nations. For many years, negotiators, as I was in this case, have tried to bring these agendas together: peace and security and development and environment, and it never happened. And here it did in 2015 with this agenda. This agenda acknowledges this important enabler of sustainable development. And another very important one, the 5th P in this strategic framework, is the partnership P. And that's actually one of the main topics of this afternoon. And therefore, there is also a specific a goal-defined SDG 17, which we will dive into a bit later and I think throughout the afternoon. But partnership is not just about implementing things or projects, it is also about setting the scene, a global kind of partnership, systemic issues that have to be in place. So SDG 17 is a lot about these issues, about trade and the necessary conditions. It's about policy coherence, it's about capacity building, financing, etc., etc. So we will hear a lot more about this later. In the center of the agenda, the picture you know, you have just seen it and hopefully many times before, the Sustainable Development Goals. And today my focus will be SDG 3 or health as a broader topic. It is quite tricky to be a representative for the whole agenda. You see 17 topics, 169 targets. Up to now, I've been doing this for 5 years now, and I still don't know 169 targets by heart, but I'm trying hard. But SDG 3 is a very special one, because it's actually at the core of the whole agenda. And I will show that later. It consists of the following 9 targets. You might have seen the one or the other before, I hope so. It's a very comprehensive goal. It's about reducing maternal mortality, deaths of newborns and children. It's about ending epidemics. It's about tackling non-communicable diseases. It's about mental health, substance abuse, road traffic accidents, sexual and reproductive health care, etc., etc. So it is really comprehensive and will bring the whole agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals forward, because it is linked with so many other issues and topics and challenges at hand. And for every goal you also have means of implementation, they are called, so targets which become a bit more concrete for action, also as a basis for implementation partnerships. So you see financing, but also policies like tobacco and capacity building. But as I said, SDG 3 or health as a topic is at the core of the whole agenda. And if you look at this spider net here, you see 16 goals and all their targets. SDG 17 is not reflected on this in this illustration, since it is a kind of a basis or an SDG that accounts for every issue and every action. But the other 16s with all their targets are illustrated here. It's a simplified illustration actually, because there are many more linkages than you can reflect on a piece of paper. But health, if you look at all the connections that health has and the subtopics, the targets, 3.1 to 3.9, they are interlinked with so many other topics, with gender equality in terms of sexual and reproductive health, with education, of course, with cities, clean air, etc., with hunger and food security, nutrition, with inequality or equality issues, sustainable consumption and production, poverty, water, and many more. So direct linkages to so many other targets are there, and if you work on one or the other target, you see you have an influence on many other issues that are being addressed with the SDGs and respective targets. And there are, of course, indirect linkages too. Through the goals that they refer to in a direct way, you have access actually to every single SDG if you work on health. So health is really at the core of the whole agenda, and I think that's a nice illustration by the WHO. It shows that it's relevant for all SDGs. But coming to business and the role of business now. Antonio Hautle mentioned it. There are so many opportunities out there. It's not just about philanthropic exercises anymore. Within sustainable development and respective sectors, there are lots of business opportunities as well. And there's a nice report of the quite new Business and Sustainable Development Commission, which consists of many global CEOs, that shows that there are opportunities of about $12 trillion until 2030 in just 4 sectors of the whole SDGs. And one is, of course, health and well-being. And it lists 60 different business opportunities. And in these areas, if a company is engaged and works, let's say, for instance, in the area of risk pooling, like insurances, health insurances, or remote patient monitoring, things like that, there are figures that show which opportunities lie ahead of companies really investing in these areas. It's another graph showing a bit where these $12 trillion until 2030 are seen. And again, health, one of the main topics where there is really a lot also to profit from in economic terms. Another graph you've just seen in the video before is in this Global Opportunity Report. This one shows that there are different sectors, and you remember the spider web I showed you. Many of these opportunities lie not within specific sectors anymore. Of course, we are used to work in these sectors, and there are still many opportunities, but many are lying in between these different sectors. Like evident for health, the health sector is, of course, the whole interrelation with the food production, nutrition, but also water quality, energy issues, maybe not that direct, but also indirectly, and a lot, of course, between technology and innovation and these different sectors. So there's where many of the business opportunities lie nowadays. I'd like to give you a short idea of what kind of partnerships we look at when addressing SDGs or implementing SDGs. One, we just started a couple of years ago with a pilot, is in the acceleration of access to medical products. It is a multi-stakeholder partnership, yet it is at an early stage, so the private sector still has to buy in, but it is about improving access to therapeutic products and other health interventions in resource-constrained countries. It consists of 2 components. One, the first, the yellow one, is on building effective regulatory networks and systems. So it's really about harmonizing national medicines registration. And therefore we have the partners Swissmedic and the WHO. Swissmedic especially works in the area of capacity building, especially now, to start with, in the Eastern African community. So that's East Africa is the focus at the moment, but doesn't have to stay there. And they work a lot in evaluation registration schemes and quality management, manufacturing practice, etc. So it's another approach. It's not about just delivering medicines and products. It's about the system, the regulatory systems which have to be strengthened. The second component of the second component of the project is the authorization procedure. So the stakeholders, the national medicines regulatory authorities, are invited to look at the Swissmedic procedures, authorization and scientific advice. And the WHO, with its pre-qualification program, is also involved there. So there's a lot about learning and knowledge transfer, also technology transfer. And with this and marketing, authorizations can be speeded up, and faster access to medicines for patients in need shall be provided. It's a project that has only started, as I said, in a pilot phase, but it has a great potential to become globally relevant, since we have these systemic issues and problems all over the world. And it has a high potential for public-private partnerships, because this has already shown it becomes like a platform where we have just a new partner now on board with the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Associations. And its members, of course, are very interested in these processes, since they are clients and buyers and resellers, at the same time. That's just one example. Another example could be the one I'm showing you here. It's not a typical health sector project. It's one in the domain of environment. It's about climate change, and it started in Latin America. And it's quite an easy concept. It's just about providing diesel particulate filters to buses and construction machines in order to address air pollution mainly. And of course all related diseases that stem from pollution issues. So we have implemented this project so far in 4 big cities, major cities in Latin America and China, together with the Federal Office of Environment and the Swiss Development Corporation, with international partners, with city authorities, construction and bus companies, filter producers, of course. These filter producers are represented in this project through an association, VERT it's called, and of course it has quite a high impact. If you think of the pictures that you know of Beijing or of other big cities in China, the air is never clean on no day the whole year round. So if you address just the bus and construction and building sectors and providing these diesel particulate filters, making business with local actors and also international actors at the same time, you have win-win-win situations. And you see the results so far. I don't have all the figures from all the different cities. I have to, of each city, I've seen some numbers which are quite impressive, but I haven't got a total success story in numbers yet. But it has a high impact potential, because take Beijing, for instance. The China Air Pollution and Control Act has now taken this concept of these filters up. It has been taken up in this Air Pollution and Control Act by the national authorities and the National Control Center of the Ministry of Environment. So it can have a high policy impact and be replicated at the political level throughout the country. So we're looking forward to new endeavors in this area. But it shows you also that it's a project that addresses many different goals at the same time. We look at health issues, of course. We are in the sector of infrastructure, of construction, building, industry. In sustainable cities, a specific goal is dedicated to that issue, climate change, and of course, partnership. Many of these potential partnerships are out there, are within reach for companies who are really willing to make a change in this area and to invest in sustainable development. How you can work with the SDGs is nicely described in this publication Antonio just mentioned before, the Sdg Compact. If you are very interested in, and I believe many of you have seen this publication already, because it is one done by Global Compact, GRI, and the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. It easily shows a sustainable development responsible in a company, how to address it, how to understand them, how to define priorities, setting goals, how to integrate it also in the core business of a company, and how to report and communicate on it. So I can only recommend to read or to have a look at this publication. So to conclude with, I would say and state, there is a business case for SDGs. That's, I think, nobody can deny that. There are enormous opportunities, new markets, products, partners, and services. There are many opportunities in the health sector. It's one of the sectors which has the highest potential for business impact and innovation, as has been shown by the sources I mentioned. So sustainability and profitability are no contradiction. And I think all of you here know, since you are among the convinced already, I guess, that gains in resource efficiency really increase competitiveness and also the health of people around the world. It's also an important reputation factor. We know that for many years already, since the CSR discussion, etc., the world is becoming more transparent. Civil society knows and can see what companies are doing, and science is involved, etc. We are already in a multi-stakeholder context, so it is also in the interest of every company to show that it is an active partner in the direction of sustainable development. So the question is no longer, why should I be interested in the SDGs, or why should I consider them even? It is, the question rather is, why shouldn't you not? So the Business and Sustainable Development Commission states in its report, the one I showed you before, that first movers who have already aligned their resource use and workforce management with the SDGs have a 5 to 15 years advantage. With this, I would like to close, and thank you very much for your attention.
I'm very happy to have you all here. SDG 17 is our first subject. We start with the last of the 17 goals, and I'm very happy to have this gender-balanced panel here. Right here, Mrs. Ilva Stiller, she's head social policy and transparency at Syngenta. Then Philipp Erni, Director of the Center for Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability, CCRS at the University of Zurich. Next to him, Gabriela Crescini, Head Client and Partner Relationship at Swiss Contact, and Michael Gerber, whom we've already heard. SDG 17 aims to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development, as we have heard. Mrs. Stiller, this SDG, how has it changed or influenced your work in these last 1.5 years since it is in place? Or has it ever, even?
Yeah, of course. Something that is novel with this SDGs is, of course, calling for the partnership also with the private sector, which is something that is very welcome from the private sector, and we have been working in partnerships for many years already. But what this has done is really to open up a platform that we can access another group of partners than perhaps before, or it has made it much more easy to align around common goals, find common solutions and work together. As you know, we've been working on our own sustainability program called the Good Growth Plan that covers several of the SDGs, and that happened to start a few years before the SDGs were launched. And this is also something that is clearly founded and connected to our business strategy. Our senior executives, their incentive structures are connected to the fulfillment of these commitments.
So it makes it easier outside and within your company.
Exactly.
To talk about
it has been a
goals.
good lever to start some of these new kind of perhaps more innovative and creative partnerships that the SDGs definitely have opened the door much more widely for a lot of companies to do.
Philipp Erni, you have thought about sustainable development also before these goals were implemented. How has it changed your research maybe, or your daily work?
Well, I just hope that it will receive more attention than before. I mean, my focus was always on empirical research in developing countries and what really works and what is not working. And I found out quite early that if you want financial sustainability, you need public-private partnership. You need the expertise of business people to make something work, to create new markets there. Not just solving problems, but also creating jobs. And our public discourse is not framed in this way that we understand the meaning of of public-private partnerships properly. Even though, if you look at the Rio conference and the Agenda 21, everything that has been stated in the SDGs is already there. And there was a commitment from everyone to promote public-private partnerships. There was a commitment to promote environmentally friendly technologies and do technology transfer, including biotechnology. And if you look what came out of it, it was a relatively sober experience. We have a bigger divide than ever before between those who care for development and allegedly those who care only for business. And we have government, we have NGOs, and we have the private sector, and they all function according to different principles. They are accountable to different people, and these people might not approve of having a collaboration. And I think we face a big institutional problem. Unless we are able to change our institutions to encourage more of these public-private partnerships, we will not be able to address these problems.
You're in the middle of this, Mrs. Grishini. Do these SDGs help you? Does SDG 17 help you in this?
We don't know yet. It's too short into the process. What we really sense is that what Ida said, that in companies where we have the convinced partners, as she is, but there's been the mindset still on the shareholder values mainly, and social and environmental topics were not part of the shareholder value. Impact was not considered, or social impact was not considered, environmental impact was not considered, that the bandwidth of people we can talk to has broadened. Whereas also you demand accountability of your companies towards the SDG goals, and this naturally will help us in our conversations.
Mr. Gerber, now you have worked on these SDGs long before they were implemented or adopted. Now that they're here, how long will you have to show this first slide that they even exist? Or do you feel that people know about them already?
It's a good question. Well, yeah, I can really feel movement and dynamic, especially actually in the private sector, the Swiss private sector. The bigger companies, they know about them right now. I would say not everyone, of course, but the challenge is still with the SMEs. And since there are so many out there in Switzerland, I think there's still a lot of work to do. So I'm very glad that the Global Compact Network Switzerland is launching this campaign now that really helps us to make them known more broadly in Switzerland. But I think there is a great opportunity with the SDGs to actually address what you just described, Mr. Erni, the difficulty to bring it all together under one framework or one common ambition and vision. Because that hasn't been the case so far. As you said, Agenda 21, the Millennium Development Goals, and many other principles out there that different actors have worked with without any interaction. I think this has really changed now with the SDGs. You have a common framework now that people, companies, actors in research, but also in civil society start to align with or work towards and do it together, and that's something that I can really see happening now. And it takes some time, of course, but it is still a larger or bigger mobilization all around the world than it used to be the case with other frameworks that were there before, like the Agenda 21 or Millennium Development Goals, which took really many, many years until they were known, and even when they ended, I think broader public didn't know them. So there is a great opportunity with the SDGs now.
I think one of the main basic conditions for these partnerships to work is a level playing field. As an external observer, I have the impression that we're far away from that. How are we going to change the level playing field between companies, big companies here in Switzerland, and stakeholders in developing countries, for example? Who wants to
Directed to me.
Probably to have first a bridge between the question he just asked and what he just said, that Mr. Gerber just said. I think I come back to what Antonio Hautler said, that we have to change our perspective with the Sustainable Development Goal versus the Millennium Development Goals at the time. It is that everybody is responsible now. And it's not that some are giving and the others are taking. And I think there is the first change of perspective that has to happen in order to get to this level that you're just mentioning right now, I guess. I mean, probably you can contradict me.
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah. But
I think it's another piece around level playing field. I mean, something that is starting to happen, and that's also very welcome, is that companies are starting to be seen as an agent for development, which this space was probably in the past more claimed by another set of stakeholders, aid agencies, NGOs perhaps, and it started to be recognized that companies are bringing another set of capabilities to the table that can help with economic transformation, which is really important when we're talking about development of rural economies or building resilient communities. And I think that's also one part that is important. But as you mentioned, there's also, when we're going into development in countries where we might not have a footprint already, it's important to get all these actors around the table to make sure that the beneficiaries' perspective is also represented in the discussion, either by themselves or by proxy by another organization. And so that's also something that needs to be taken into account, obviously, when you embark on this journey.
But concretely, if you as Syngenta go into a country with your project, you are the big player.
Not necessarily. You might say, not necessarily. We might be a big international player, but in the country we might be quite small. That doesn't mean that we don't have a big impact in the country. So if I would take an example such as our seeds business in India, granted there's about 10 companies that have the majority market of seeds business in India, and we are one of them, but we're by far not the biggest one. But we have a big footprint there because we have around 30,000 farmers growing seeds for us. So we need to address whatever it is that needs to be addressed in the supply chain. And we make sure that we have local partners helping us to understand the local context. We have an international NGO helping us address the topics that needs to be addressed. And we make sure that we have the people who we are impacting has a seat at the table, the farmers, their workers, their communities where they work. And of course, you need to go into that kind of a conversation in another way than if you would do in a research partnership or a business partnership. There are other stakes at the table.
But it's still a business partnership.
Surely, but in order to address the challenges for us in this examples I'm taking up, it was labor rights and labor standards in our seed supply chain. That is definitely the issue to address, but what we end up doing is to build capacity in the community. And so, of course, it's a business proposition for us, but it's also building a strong commercial partner with our supplier.
And with regard to the question, a level playing field, it implies a little bit, well, there's private interest and public interest, and corporations pursue private interest, often at the expense of the public interest. So there's already this dividing framing in it. And my empirical research in Kenya, for example, also when I looked at Syngenta and other companies, and whenever a project to promote environmental services or other public goods work on the long run, there is entrepreneurship and innovation involved. And those who enable these local people to become entrepreneurs and to innovate and to create new markets are often not NGOs but companies. And once a small local company can sell something to Syngenta or gets access to its technology, it can quickly become a formal company by itself. And it helps endogenous development, an economic development from inside. And there, we cannot just argue that the moral high ground is with NGOs or governments. No, there is a clear, there's also moral courage by companies who go there, who know the uncertainty is great, but we take this risk and we need to work with the local people. There's another problem. I mean, if you are a company and you do nothing for the local people, you will have a problem with the license to operate eventually, because politicians can actually gain a lot of votes by having this anti-corporate talk, especially if they are foreign companies, claim that they will be nationalized and so on. So it's not a zero-risk strategy. And companies need, out of self-interest, of long-term self-interest, commit themselves to the region if they want to be there for a longer time, I think.
Sure. And Swisscontact role as an NGO in this field has been to bridge actually between the different mindsets very often, and we see that they come very much closer together in the last years, like the business lines come much closer to the development work, and also like that there is also a need for cooperation or pre-competitive cooperation. The model of competition sometimes from the automotive industry could be taken into the game there in order to get the better results. But on the other hand, you just mentioned it. I mean, the big international companies are not the ones, the world changer. It's the local solution for the local markets where multinationals can play a role or be a market or be an enabler or be also a helpful power if policy dialogues have to be steered in a certain direction. They can be, but they cannot if they are not cooperating somehow. I mean, two very important sectors for Switzerland in developing countries is, we discussed it at our lunch, is, for example, cocoa, or it's also tourism. We see in both fields a lot is happening, but there it's also countries that profit a lot from I mean, it's not only the multinationals that profit there, it's state of officials even that profit a lot, whereas it doesn't go down their line to the smallholder farmers. And there, I think, non-competitive cooperation of the big multinationals could help enable the system on the ground.
But I imagine it's in a lot of these countries they don't have strong states. Who is supposed to coordinate? I mean, if the stakeholders are even not strong, and companies are with their ideas in there, I think that it looks very nice on the scheme you showed, you know, all these interconnections, but on the ground, the big difficulty, I imagine, to coordinate all the efforts. Mr. Gerber.
Yeah, well, the coordination is always a big challenge, and I think the larger the multi-stakeholder partnerships become, the more difficult is coordination. That's, I think, in nature of these partnerships. But SDG 17 is actually exactly about establishing that level playing field that you are speaking about. It's about technology transfer, it's about knowledge transfer, capacity building, etc., etc. So in the projects I have shown, I also mentioned the partners involved, and there you always have partners from the public sector that involve ministries of transport or health or whatever, in what sector you work, private companies, civil society, even farmers. So it is a complex coordination scheme, but it has to work this way somehow. And then you have, of course, countries in which the states are weaker, and you have countries in which authorities are stronger. But there you have to find ways and solutions to go along these processes. In the end, it's really about finding these win-win-win situations where a company can make profit and at the same time contribute to sustainable development, and the local country, the public and private sector, can profit from and establish its development from inside, as you said. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal.
Just some examples to question how serious are we about this. We, at FAO, where I worked for 2 years, we had it's the Secretary of the Tropical Agriculture Platform is based there, and it's a G20 initiative to find out how can we reactivate the national agricultural innovation systems in tropical countries, and what can we contribute. So we did stakeholder surveys in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in Central America, to find out what are the priorities, what would they like from developed countries. It turned out that they want private sector capacity development, not public sector capacity development. And if you look at our projects, we don't really promote that. We are still having these public sector initiatives, and the private sector can join or can contribute some money, but the expertise, the competences in the private sector are not really tapped. And in Switzerland, all OECD countries signed this Paris Declaration of Aid Effectiveness, where we committed ourselves to respect the priorities in these countries. And I wonder who measures whether we meet these, we meet our commitment. I mean, there needs to be also a critical questioning in Switzerland. Do we really go into the right direction in this area? And I just remember we had Ann Miru as a guest speaker at the university. She was head of UNCTAD, Technology and Logistics, and she complained to the students, said, what we need are people in the field of trade facilitation. But whenever a European country wants to sponsor a job at UNCTAD, it must be gender or whatever. And she even told them, please, we have already 15 people working on gender. We have no one on trade facilitation. Please fund someone on trade facilitation. But obviously, that doesn't sell well back home. So it's, and then you see the SDGs want to emphasize trade facilitation. They want to emphasize technology transfer mechanisms and all these things. But if we have these institutional problems where you don't really want to contribute to this because it might affect you in another field negatively, so I think we need an open discussion on these issues too.
So, but you're saying that it's still the states that define where the development goes. Would you agree with that?
But I think that's a traditional view for sure. But I think that's changing, and you see that more and more companies are taking, going ahead, not waiting for, getting the go-ahead from a state to say this is where we think you should go. There's a lot of companies that are joining together in industry associations together with UN or other economic organizations to find common ground together with governments in the countries that they're interested in, to see that can we align on where investment from the government interest is in the country, where do you have private sector interest, and also, of course, the gold standard would be to get the aid organizations to join in the same path, and then you would have a very strong, solid investment climate that would also make it possible for small and medium-sized companies to come along. Mm-hmm. It's about managing risks as well.
I definitely want to come back to what can be done to integrate small and medium enterprises later, but I'd use this opportunity right now to open up for a short round of questions from you. Please, there are microphones in the room. These ladies will bring it to you. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Claude Bigley, Swiss Parliament. Before I ask my question, I just to say I'm very favorable to the strategic development goals. Having said that, how to capture the public opinion about the interest about the SDGs, I mean really the general public. The reality, I see three strong objections. When we presented the SDGs in the Parliament, some of us who were fan of it, we tried to convince the others, and they replied, oh, we already have it. It's part of the Confederation General Program. And even some said, we even don't have to talk about it because it's better, it's implicit. Let's talk about very concrete things like trade facilitation. The second is they say, it's too complex, it's just done for academics, but, you know, it's too complicated. And the third, it's for good weather policy. You speak about a lot of nice things. In French, they say bisounours. And actually, when it comes to very specific points, you take all of those, but you take them when it doesn't work, then people wake up because it doesn't work. And as long as you present it as a smooth process, it looks like uninteresting or not enough relevant. So, hence my question. I'm absolutely convinced that the interest of the SDGs is the interrelations between all of them. But of course, that interrelation is complex. How can we explain to Mr. and Mrs. everybody the usefulness of that when they are not necessarily specialists and without losing their attention?
Thank you very much.
That's good.
Who would like to answer?
I think there we could ask Antonio, because he tries to do this with the Swiss SMEs right now. No? He might have some arguments for it. Yes.
You have a microphone?
Yeah, I'll just put it back. Yeah.
There's another one.
That's fine. Just give me this one.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's the big challenge I face, because I'm turning around for Swiss Global Compact network all over, and the SDGs are part of always of the discussions. And what I observe is, in fact, the large public does not even know the SDGs. What is that I'm always wearing my pin here. Even the technician up there was asking me this morning, what is that? The 17 colors of the SDGs, and that's why I'm wearing it, so I have always the occasion to speak. No, but in fact, I think we should maybe also plan together how we can improve the knowledge of it, because the agenda is not for the third world. You're discussing always over there in Africa. No, it's about here. What are we doing as Swiss business to really realize it? The example you always give, Michael, 82 or 83% of our water consumption happens here in Switzerland. Is imported. So 80% of our water consumption we import. What is about this? And I think we have to start with these kind of examples and very practical things. And that's what we are right now developing in our Tour de Suisse. That's the idea, to bring Rotary, Young CVP, etc., all these people together to start these kind of discussions. And I think we're just we're just 2 people in our office, so we have to be realistic. So it's maybe also the question, what is the parliament doing? Somebody was proposing you should tell all our Bundesräte ministers that they have to, in each speech they are making, they have to make somewhere a relation to the SDGs. So it would start to be known also in the public as a global agenda. So these are just some thoughts, but I think each and everyone here is responsible to be part of this agenda, make it known. It's about the future of our grandchildren. That's always the example I'm giving, and that's why I'm so eager to push this agenda. And I was invited from your party to speak once with the parliamentarians. We'll see whether that is successful or not. Probably not, but we'll try, and we will not give up.
So you're all multiplicators. Maybe another question to the panel? Yeah? Ah, okay.
Yeah, I would just like to confirm that it's a real challenge. Yes, indeed, it is. But let's think whether we really need each and every Swiss citizen to know about each and every SDG. So maybe that ambition is also quite high. I think a very important mobilizer is the private sector, indeed, and there I see some mobilization, indeed, and also through the network. But when I started to get in a closer exchange with private sector representatives and companies, I have really learned a lot, and I've seen that many are already active for quite some time in the area of sustainable development. CSR is out there for a long time, etc. And they're just doing it. And now it's maybe about paradigm change in terms of how we implement sustainable development, making it part of the core business, etc. But yeah, you know, the public will never hear about that, or not in the first place. But a company, of course, has to show results in that domain, and it should do so, but still you won't reach each and every citizen. We unfortunately can't go broad with a campaign with taxpayers' money and, you know, make them known all over the place. Is also quite difficult. But I still believe in the long-term approach, because what is happening right now is that it will become part of the curricula in schools. So education, I think, is a very important way of changing paradigms and mindsets. And you see that with the whole recycling industry, for example, in Switzerland. 20 years ago, it wasn't really an issue, but nowadays we are almost champions in this area. And every child knows about it, that we have to bring the bottles there and the paper there, etc. So it's about... It's, I think, a generation project in the end, and we do a lot through these channels of education already in primary schools, but then also all the way to research at the tertiary level in universities, etc. So I think with these different approaches, we will get there, maybe not by 2030, but in a generation's time. And we need time, but it will happen.
Mm-hmm. I'm
still a little bit skeptical because we also had a research project on biotechnology and model development, for example, in high schools, also with a strong connection to sustainable development. And I noticed that Swiss high schools, sustainability is essentially meant as being a lifestyle. And we see it also at the University of Zurich in the Nachhaltigkeitswoche, all the things that are offered. I mean, you can take a bicycle and go to the botanical garden and do some yoga with other people. But what is really the link to sustainable development? And if that's really taught to if that's what is taught in our schools, that this is what sustainability means, I don't think that they understand the sustainable development goals at the end.
Yes, does it really matter? Because, I mean, it is, of course, not about sustainability, what you just described. But if it's becoming fancy and even sexy to be sustainable, why should it be a problem? And the opposite is the case. No, if it really generates a movement, you know, in the right direction, but why not?
Because there is implicitly an anti-business mentality in it. For example, there was also at the Nachhaltigkeitswoche, they would collect some discarded fruits from farms and make nice fruit juices out of it, and they offer it, and they say you can contribute something. And then I told him, why don't you make a business out of this? Because you are the share of this discarded food you collect is about 0.0001%. But if you make a business out of it, you can maybe reach 20% or whatever. And they said, no, we don't do it for the sake of business. We do it because it gives us meaning and identity. And so I agree. It doesn't work in this way.
How to react to this anti-business mentality?
No, I mean, this is probably, a little bit the movement that has gone, everything has to be a social business somehow. You know, in the last years, every businessman that made money somehow, and at the end said, okay, and we're investing now in social businesses, whereas the terminology already is not clear to what they mean by it. But this is a little bit the movement that goes into it with the shared economy, and we are like nice people and doing nice things. Whereas I completely second his idea on actually make a business out of it, and it will be sustained because the business, actually the economic foundation of everything that we do is probably the driver to achieve the rest of it. If we don't have the economic foundation, we will not be able to finance ecology, peace, or whatever is in the new 5. What is this now? Not the triple bottom line anymore, but how do you call it? With these 5 pillars
5 P's, yeah.
For sustainability.
Bent. That sounds scary.
Okay, maybe there's another question in the room. Yes, please, sir.
Philipp König from Praneo, Geneva. Before I ask a question, I would like to make a comment to your question. Beyond education at all ages, including IMD, EPFZ, EPFL, and schools, I think to understand why do people have these 3 reactions to anything that is complex, to anything they do not understand, is maybe a key to change mindsets. So I went around Switzerland and asked psychiatrists, neurologists, what do they think? And it's really interesting to see the answers. And there is neurocognitivism, which is a science that is quite young, less than 10 years old. And we start to understand that we are in 2 states of mind, either automatic, where we stay in our zone of comfort, so we do what we know. And we do it over and over, and we cannot change the outcomes. And this is basically what you have described. And the other way of functioning is an adaptive mode. And the adaptive mode can be learned. And it can be learned by what Philipp Erni has been saying. Meditation is part of it. and it is learning to learn. And we've asked the question to the EPFL, André Schneider, while he was still there. Are we able to actually train systemic thinkers, holistic leaders, and societal leaders who would actually act upon the goal number 17? And I'll let you ask him the question to know the answer. but I would be very interested to see how we can work all together to find the answers. There won't be easy answers, as you have said too. It won't be short term, but if we start today, it's still better than to wait until tomorrow. So my question to you is really, coming out of this day, how can we address this if this is the most important question? How to live the global goal number 17 in our commune, in our cantons, in our cities, in all the regions of Switzerland. And we have this goal to make it happen in Geneva or Greater Geneva, including Lausanne. So we'll be discussing this. But we would like to do it with the Tessin and the Swiss-German part of Switzerland too. So how do we make it happen, getting out of this room at the end of the day?
That's the basic question of today. Do you want to give it first?
Well, my view is we need to have a contextual and dynamic understanding of sustainability. That what we thought is sustainable 20 years ago has nothing to do with what we now think is sustainable. And in 20 years from now, we might look back and think that was not really sustainable. And it's also, when we look back, the challenges Switzerland faced 150 years ago are very similar to challenges in least developed countries at the moment. And they have different priorities. And it's so difficult for us to acknowledge that what is sustainable here might not be sustainable there. And in the SDG 17, there is so much emphasis on South-South collaboration, triangular collaboration, but it requires that we acknowledge that they might do certain things better than we do, because they have gone through the development recently, whereas the Swiss people think it has always been like that in Switzerland. And so that's what I understand on the complexity. We can't have this one-size-fits-all idea of sustainability. We need to take into account that economic matter more in these countries, because first you need to generate a certain amount of income to pay taxes, to care for public goods. Otherwise, it will always be public-private partnerships. And that's the thing. We think today that, everything goes from public to private, so everything's privatization. No, in Switzerland, it started all with public-private partnerships because the government lacked the tax revenues to care for public goods. It lacked the competencies and the means. So it needed to reach out to businesses to jointly solve problems. And that's what I don't like about the CSR, corporate social responsibility concept. It's do no harm. No, it's more. They are part of the solution. And as long as they always say, yeah, we try to do no harm, they will not do they will not do much good, because it lacks courage. The whole concept lacks courage.
Maybe we can just say, do no harm is still also important, no? You have to do good, but you have to make sure.
Now. We focused all our, if you look at all the standards, how to avoid risks, all these compliance departments have grown, the due diligence departments have grown, but we still have moral hazard. And it's just you can't solve these problems entirely by regulating them, I think.
Yeah. Yes?
Hello, thank you. Guillaume Crépin from Bank Josaph Sarrazin. So my question is about what's different today than at the time of the Millennium Development Goals. Why do you think companies are actually now more mobilized, and you see it in your different work and network? What's different? I guess not all CEOs went for yoga, so there must be some other pressure somewhere. And then why do you think they will be success? What are the success factors for businesses to actually positively contribute, and why might they also fail? And where you see the biggest challenges? Because it's not a given that all business solutions and initiatives will actually produce the results we expect. So what should we be careful of?
I guess that was directed at me. I think what is different is, first of all, how the SDGs came about. The whole process was different than the Millennium Development Goals. They were also from the beginning a real call for action for businesses, and that their voice was part of the development. I remember that myself. We were active in that conversation. But I also think that a little bit, I don't know if they all went to yoga, but they certainly have had some experiences with this type of partnerships that they can bank on now. They feel confident that this is something that we can do. We certainly messed up a couple of times, but we also have some successes in our backs that we are comfortable and confident that we can do this. And I think one thing to watch out or what we need to be mindful of is when we're talking about, I mentioned that before, partnerships in business, we do that, that's our daily bread in R&D or business-to-business JVs, what have you. That's all about partnerships, but that's a whole different kind of partnerships than what we're talking about now. When we're talking about partnerships for development, it's about going into a collaboration with no preempted ideas on how this should work, going into these conversations open-mindedly, and also be willing to constantly challenge the concept that you have set up. Challenge the approach, and if it doesn't work, throw it out and start anew. And this is something that throwing out stuff and starting new companies are quite good at that, and sometimes we do that a little bit too quickly. That's why it's good that we have partners that might be, pacing that development. But these kind of partnerships are very challenging. There's no certainties that they will be successes, but if they're successful, they will have such a great impact. And I think just the prospect of being able to build something like this, being able to create this development that is necessary for all the other 16 goals that we have up there on the screen and we've talked about today, makes it worthwhile to take this, address these challenges. But I agree, it takes courage, and it takes also some amount of comfort or feeling that we will be able to stem whatever is coming our way and have good partners. So that's why having a wide, diverse set of partners in these kind of collaborations is important. I don't know if that addressed or responded to your question, but I hope.
Yes. I think, there were, you went through a whole learning curve, I think, with the collaboration, North-South now. We're talking about big multinationals going in there, and in our history we learned very often that we think we know the solution to a problem and we want to transfer this to another country and think it's going to work there too. That will not. And we are very disappointed when we don't get along with the culture, the business culture on the ground, the culture on the ground, the systems on the ground. Doing business, what we call corruption, is probably there the way they do business. And we don't understand, and we bring our values to other countries and think they should function as we do because we have donors in our bags or CEOs in our bags that have our values coming along with our projects. And I think what you mentioned is also what happens more and more in the NGO world, that we do the so-called human-centered design for projects, that you really go into the communities or into the business environment. Because as you mentioned, these people know very often what they would need, but we don't give them what they would need. And or we don't, and you said it, academic partnerships, for example, are very, very important, and we are not really made for it. I don't know how well EPFL or whatever is made to have really a academic partnership with one of these partner countries. But I think this is also what we call collaboration. I think it's also not only across, in the same sectors, but also between politicians and academia and the private sector. Sorry, did this probably answer a little bit your question? Also?
I have two more questions now after these answers. Maybe the first one is what you mentioned also, that Swiss companies shouldn't import their recipes. But where's the limit? If a country is completely corrupt or the government abuses human rights, where do you stop saying, okay, where's the limit?
To us as an NGO, to SDC, or to the company?
To all of you.
Well, I think it's very unpredictable. A government can appear to be very stable, and all of a sudden there is a civil war, or there is a lot of uncertainty going on, and often you can't control it. You assume that certain things will continuously develop like this, and suddenly you are faced with a lot of dilemmas. We saw it with the case of Holcim and others, where you suddenly end up in very difficult challenges, and how to respond in such difficult situations. Of course, there are wrong responses, but you can't. But only with mistakes you can actually learn how to better deal with these issues. It's not. I don't think we have universal principles we can apply for every context. But it's all what you said: trial and error, making mistakes, learning from them, avoiding them next time. I think that's a crucial point. And with regard to SMEs, I wanted still to say something. if you look, why not selling? And if you tell them, well, look, 8% of our water consumption comes from water, it's already too abstract for them. I mean, they want to see, is there a business for us to invest in sustainability? And I think the government could be much more active in saying, look, those genius Swiss companies that develop fantastic technologies that could also be useful for these countries there, let's help them to reduce the risks to invest there. Let's back them up. And not just with export risk insurance, but clear means of pre-financing things. And of course, the Swiss always say, well, no, we are neutral. We only want to promote good governance. But the Chinese do it. Everyone in the South does it. And that's why we lose all the business there. That's why when we organized the conference on development investment and sustainable change in Ethiopia, there's one big Swiss consortium with ABB and Molinari Rails, and they can build one railway there. But out of 5 big projects, 1 went to the Swiss, and with a German Deutsche Bank and others involved. But they said we lose, ABB says we have better and cheaper substations than the Chinese, but because the Chinese pre-finance everything, the Ethiopian government has no choice, and then they take the Chinese option. And so we should also rethink a little bit, if we can make a difference with our companies in these countries, why not supporting them, reducing the risks, so that it's really worthwhile investing? I mean, that's the point.
Well, I think the nature of these partnerships have changed indeed. I mean, there are many examples out there, like in the water sector or the water footprint that we have abroad. We have different innovative projects with big multinational companies that have started to look at their whole value chain, and together we identify the common risk, challenge, and at the same time opportunity, meaning to reduce water use in these value chains they have. For instance, Nestle in the coffee sector, the cocoa project with SECO and the Swiss Contact you mentioned before is a big one. In the rice sector, we have such projects ongoing where it's really possible with Swiss technology and Swiss business interest do no harm and do good also to the very beginning of the value chain with the farmers, and there we have a common interest. But I think I wouldn't really go the Chinese way. I think we have a different mentality and our companies do, but still you are right, and I think we are working on and with these incentives. But it's no longer the case that the public identifies a certain interest and then it goes private and looks for partners. It's often the other way around. We see a lot of dynamic innovation happening in the private sector, also in partner countries, and then we look at opportunities that are of common interest, and then we start fostering social entrepreneurship, etc., etc. I think it's a different approach to what we used to have with the MDGs. You mentioned the MDGs, where it was a lot about delivery. It was a really delivery modes that we were still in. North finances South, development cooperation the classic way, social development mainly. No infrastructure, no governance issues in this framework, etc., etc. That has completely changed with the SDGs, and the SDGs give us a common framework. I think there, if you speak about intercultural differences, etc., of course there are no universal principles that are agreed by everybody in the whole world, but there are the human rights and so. Some principles are widely accepted, at least, and I think with the SDGs, business and public sectors get a new orientation framework where we can work together towards common solutions and innovation, and that's what probably most of involved parties and people would accept.
There was one question here, please.
Thanks. We talk now a lot about innovation, new business cases. I'm wondering how we are going to tackle the problem that a lot of the businesses, for example in commodity, cannot be conducted in this way for the next 10, 20, 30 years anymore. So I think we don't have just innovation. I don't doubt that there is going to be a lot of innovation. But how do we tackle this issue that all these big players will also get engaged in the democratic processes in public life, and that we just can address that they have other interests that, for example, the SDGs are promoting?
difficult, challenging question.
I mean, first, most of the partner countries also signed the SDGs, so some of the goals must be common. But the priorities are probably a little bit different than from our world. This is probably what you mentioned before. I mean, the first goal of a farmer in Southeast Asia is to feed his family. So the economics is the first step. And probably he is already working quite sustainably in the old ways. So, I mean, the vision is probably not so different, but the priorities are probably a little bit different. But you were mentioning that the doing business that we have done the last 20 years might not be the way to go forward. Did I get this?
Yeah, exactly. Or for example, we're talking always about, for example, oil is big. But if you're talking about the chalk industry in Switzerland, they will have to cut down if we really want to. There are really a lot of CO2 emissions that come out of these industries. And we don't really talk about these businesses that will have to be conducted in another scale. We have to downscale these businesses. And it's okay that we're innovative and making new business, new deals that are sustainable. But what's about all the things that we conduct nowadays in business that is not sustainable?
But once again, I think the solution, I mean, you look, increasing population growth, increasing affluence, people will not suddenly stop consuming. I mean, and we might be able to afford to become more ascetic, but it's also a phenomenon of affluence to say, I limit myself. Most people need more. They cannot yet limit themselves. And so how do we cope with this big challenge? And we can really learn again from history. I mean, I always remember the case of the whale fishes in the 19th century, one of the biggest sustainability problems, because all the lamps used in cities were using whale fish oil because it was a clear light without smoke. And so there was a big demand. It was regulated, it was banned to hunt whale fishes, but that made the price of whale fish even go further up, and it went into illegal parts. And then one guy invented kerosene. And today, kerosene is not considered to be sustainable at all, but at that time it was the perfect substitute of whale fish oil. So within a couple of years, the price of whale fish oil went down from $1,500 a barrel to $4. There was no incentive anymore to go hunting whales. And that just illustrates, find a substitute and then create a market out of this to get rid of the old unsustainable practices. But you can't just regulate it and then think the problem is gone, because people will continue to go into black markets or they want to consume this. So find a scalable innovation that is cheaper and better in terms of sustainability, and then you have, and then the market can be a solution.
And the second thing is probably what you mentioned, that the unsustainable production, we use then water and air and public goods to be unsustainable. And there probably I'm talking for my climate that is not here now. They would say pay for what you take. So you should also pay for producing waste, not only like solid waste, but also air pollution, for example, much more, or using air and water. I think, and then it gets more expensive, which means that substituting technologies will be affordable and scalable. And that might come. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. But the time is up for this first panel. Thank you so much. Head Public Health Nutrition at Nestlé, and Ellen Mortensen, Managing Director Food Security at Westergaard. Now this panel is less gender balanced, but we have 4 very interesting men.
We're all feminists.
All feminists, yeah. Now, the first question I'd like to ask to all of you, for SDG 3 wants to ensure health and well-being for all at every stage of life. How do you personally contribute to this goal, Ellen Mortensen? In your profession, I mean, not in private life.
Not when I'm at home. Well, I think it's a slightly maybe easier question to answer for me, because I work in a company that basically has its business around this one goal. So working in a company where you sit as a global company innovating game changers, changing solutions that contribute to a healthier and more sustainable planet, when that is your reason for being,
maybe
it's
you have to say
super
2
difficult.
words to what you do in your business, because
oh yeah, sorry. So we work in malaria, supplying mosquito nets. We've got about 1 billion people around the world that has benefited from our products in malaria. We work in water. We have a product called Life Straw that cleans dirty water, mainly in developing countries. It's also being sold in the US for outdoor people, crazy enough to drink dirty water over there. And then I had a new little department that runs food security, helping farmers to reduce their post-harvest losses. So yeah, sorry for not introducing that first.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
But yeah, so
My job to add.
so I guess everything I do evolves around that in my professional life. I don't basically do anything else than that. So it's a bit easy to answer, I guess.
You do no harm, but we get back to that. Michael Fürst, how about you? Novartis?
You know, I think when I remember the statistics right, the life expectancy at the beginning of the 2000s increased 5 years at the global level. And this is surely not because of corporate responsibility. Let's be clear about that. That's because we have colleagues that are doing fantastic things in research, developing very unique and powerful new medicines, very innovative things. And then we have commercial colleagues on the ground working with private sector, with governments to make these things available. And that's our core business. Now, one thing is clear, this core business is limited in terms of the patient groups that we are addressing with that business. That's more the affluent part of the global income population. And here our role, or my role, comes in. I'm working with the business to expand into other socioeconomic patient segments, and work with them to develop new business models, to help them to implement those. And that's my contribution, so to say, to the Sustainable Development Goals. But I want to put this, and I want to see this in the context of what Novartis is doing overall and what the other 120,000 people in this company are doing, because that's, of course, of high relevance when we talk about SDG and health in more general terms.
Thank you. Caspar Ries, you as a researcher, do you do anything for this in order to achieve this goal?
No, I do nothing. That's the reason. No, I must admit I have a little bit of double hat. One part being a researcher at an academic institution, where personally I'm mainly dealing with questions related to human resource development, so questions about health workforce. And by the way, just to make a link to the first panel and also to what was said at the very beginning, I think we often forget a little bit let's say, the health sector as one of those sectors which considerably contributes to the creation of new job opportunities. It's at the end one of those sectors in nearly all of the countries of the world where growth is highest and where the most new employment has been created. So there is also a strong societal value in that. So that's, but basically in academic part, questions about human resource development in the health sector. But then I have also another hat where we act as a mandator for many different governments, like the Swiss government, but also the government of Germany and the UK, in implementing health sector support projects, mainly in middle and lower income countries. So assisting those countries in making it possible that the population has better access to health services with administering public money. So what is development aid? So in that sense I have a double hat. And I hope I make here my substantial contribution to move on the SDGs agenda forward.
Okay, thank you. Jörg Spieldenner, you're a food company.
A food company, so...
What does that have to do with health?
Enhancing the quality of life and contributing to a healthier future. So that's the purpose of Nestlé. So Nestlé is a food company, but with a very clear purpose. We do not define ourselves as a food company, but as a company who wants to prepare and make the food and provide nutrition so that the world can profit in a better place. My personal contribution, I think that's different from a business, also to NGOs or to academia, business sets targets and business fulfills these targets and is measured against the targets. I think that's a profound difference. So we said that by 2016 we want to provide 200 billion servings of fortified foods. Fortified food means that is food that is enriched with vitamins and minerals. We have achieved the target by 202 billion servings. So in West Africa we provide 65 billion servings of fortified cubes, therefore contributing to public health. And I have a privilege that I'm going to be responsible for the research and development community to develop new technologies, new ways of doing that in order to access, similar to what Michael said, in order to get to the lower socioeconomic classes.
But how do we have to imagine your positions within your companies? Are you sustainability freaks, or is this really in the core, in the center of the company, as we always hear, but is it actually there?
Nestle does not believe in the approach of corporate social responsibility. Nestle follows the principle of creating shared value. So you have to have value for the shareholder, which is important because we're a company, but also to have and to create value for the society. So that is ingrained in the action. And when you look at our annual report and at our new purpose, we have defined that according to the SDGs. So the SDGs is actually the starting point where we have said we want to change the life for the individuals and families, for the communities and for the planet, with clear indicators, clear actions and forward-looking commitments where the external world can actually monitor Nestle if it fulfills its targets or not. I'll give you an example from the environment. Under the leadership of Nestle, by 2025, we want to have zero landfill, so we will not produce waste. This is 5 years ahead of the SDGs. And Nestle has convinced other companies in the Consumer Goods Forum, which is a forum of all consumer goods producing companies, to go ahead with these targets. So that shows you very clearly how the SDGs are going to be integrated into a company doing business. Not at all angles. And that's very clear because it's not always easy. I don't want to paint a picture that is glorious. There are also issues with that.
Michael Fürst, how is it within Novartis?
You need to ask my colleagues, but I perceive being a freak. I don't know. No, I surely have an interest in corporate responsibility and sustainability. That's something I can say with a lot of confidence. And I believe that's also recognized by my colleagues, and they appreciate this because I don't have the impression that I'm coming from a position of a moral high ground and I have to push and convince them all the time what is morally good or what is morally bad. They know this quite well. But I think we have to find ways in the company to work in an environment which is very performance oriented, which is working against economic targets, to integrate these social targets and objectives that are also mirrored in the Sustainable Development Goals in a way that our business colleagues can work against those too. Now you can call this shared value or you can find other terminology. At the end of the day, that's not important, but that's the work we are doing. So we are really trying to support them in this journey to embrace these kind of goals and to make them part of their daily endeavor. And that's definitely not easy. That's a quite difficult thing. You need to understand business, otherwise you can't work with them. You know, if you don't understand business, but you try to persuade them to embrace sustainability targets, then you are perceived as a freak, which is not a good starting position. So that's the kind of work we are doing. It's really helping them and supporting them wherever we can.
Alan Mortensen, isn't the fact that your company focuses on exactly what you just described the proof? Are you freaks, or are you the proof that other companies just don't focus on sustainability?
Well, I don't think we are all freaks. There are certainly some freaks in my company, no doubt about that. But I think when you evolve your business around doing business and doing good and agree with everybody working in the company that it's not mutually exclusive, then you have a good starting point. Like Premier League sitting here next to us, company-wise, they do the same. They have decided to centralize a lot, and they have decided to run projects in these countries where it really matters. We have decided to only innovate for that area, and then if the technology works in Switzerland, we will also sell it in Switzerland. But that will always be with the aim of bringing stuff back to where we think it makes most sense. So in that case, we could be seen as some sort of freak, I guess. But I think we have all the same common ground, that doing business and doing good is not mutually exclusive. And then there's thousands of ways of doing this. But we are all struggling somehow, I guess, to find those measurable indicators that our whole organization can work towards. Like, okay, we made this profit. Yes, well done. Well, did we save this amount of people, or was this because they just got richer? Or was this because of your food, or our clean water, or some great medicine? You know, it's much, much more difficult to measure those things. And as business, you know, we want things tangible. So yeah, there's no doubt that's a big challenge for any company. But it comes down to the people you employ, the people you have around you, the management, what they do, how they see the world, what their story they're telling, and how they are as people, really. That, yeah, I think it's down to it.
Caspar Wies, how do you perceive it as a researcher with your double hat? Do businesses, companies tackle the right problems concerning health?
I think they play an important and vital role. But let's say, I think we must clearly recognize they are not the only player. I think there are also other players needed. I was in the first part, or also during the presentations earlier, a little bit worried that I think it's very laudable, for example, to disengage what is classically seen as development aid. And that would be the wrong message. Huh? If the private sector starts basically to fill in the gaps which are left by governments or by limited public commitment to equity or to social justice, I think that would not be the good way around. Maybe one aspect, and the other one also, I think, let's say there are certain things the private sector does very good. I think we heard examples about food fortification, drugs, we have the ACT story, we have the bed nets represented. But sometimes you need also systems. It's not only drugs that you need, or tools. Huh? There is sometimes not only a single product which gives you basically all the solutions. And I think there, obviously, also private industry will struggle more with it, building up a drug regulation system or those aspects. That's inherently more difficult sometimes than having a kind of fortified food, or you name it, what it is exactly.
For a system that I think is very important is the sustainability, which is very often forgotten. And I believe that sustainability you can only create if there is winners on all sides. And I think this is possible to do so. And when you get something sustainable, if programs very often are financed by donors, by governments, by states, if the priorities change, programs are going to die out. And then often what happens is the private industry jumps then in or tries to or gets the load of carrying it on. And I think that's important to have it in the design so that incentives are for everybody. When he showed Mr. Gerber showed the spider web at the beginning, how these sustainable development goals are interacting and influencing each other. When I look at the healthcare system today, in most of the countries, more than 98% of the money goes into treatment, and only 2% go into prevention, including Switzerland, including Mexico, including most of the development countries. So health equals treatment system, but health doesn't equal treatment system. Health equals, as you said, Michael, to look at the person as such. So water, access to sanitation, hygiene, the famous WASH movement, when Nestle is part of it, that's important. The food is part of it. Zero hunger contributes 50%. Hunger contributes to 50% of child mortality. So it's very, very important to see the linkage of these and to connect the dots on the spot. That the private industry as a single industry, where we have definitely a competence in looking at hunger, you have a competence in looking at sanitation, at malaria, at water, you have a sanitation and drug treatment. So here the coordination body would need to be put together. And I think that's a good thing what the new WHO director wants to reinforce and to look at how to create sustainable health systems on the spot where the private industry can play its part. But it's playing its part.
But can you make business by doing prevention? I mean, it's basically saying eat less fat.
No, I give you
a good example.
I'm provoking a little bit. I mean, the critics, yeah.
The food fortification is a very good example, huh? To put certain vitamins and certain essentially micronutrients into the food. It's a very good example of a public health measure which is well documented to be one among the most cost-effective measures. Sorry, I have forgiven the answer for you.
No, but
it's your job to do that.
Somebody speaks very positively from academia, honestly. But it's exactly the point. And then you need to drive also the marketing, because we operate in a business model where we address ourselves directly to consumer. So if you can integrate the health message into the marketing, and the consumer is ready to buy the product for the health benefit it's going to drive, then that is good business.
But look, maybe this question was a little bit directed towards the pharmaceutical sector, because it's perceived as if there would be a tension between prevention and treatment or cure. Come on, let's face it, we have a growing population. We have huge issues from a chronic disease perspective on this planet. 75% of all the deaths in terms of chronic diseases are happening in low and lower income countries. Do we really believe that if we invest in prevention that our commercial model is at stake? Come on, that's ridiculous. This is such a huge challenge that there is enough business to make, even when you drive preventative activities from a company's perspective or from other actors. If Nestle contributes with good food to proper nutrition and proper health, this will not bite our business away so that we can close the shop tomorrow. That's not how it works, definitely not. So I believe we should have a huge interest in prevention from many different perspectives, for sure.
I'm convinced. I'm
because
just saying that
the healthcare
Nestle
systems are
produced,
at stake.
the critiques say that you have, for example, a lot of salt in your pizzas, or that your blockbusters are not prevention treatments, probably so far, but that will change. You say that's what
Look, education, information, and prevention brings just a different awareness. What is the problem in most of the low and social income countries is there is no awareness, neither on non-communicable diseases, so on the diseases Michael was talking about, nor on nutrition side. So the education, the communication, the information will raise the awareness so that the people are just more aware of that, and then automatically the focus will shift in the consumption on more preventive or on more treatment-oriented expenditure. It's just a way of how health is going to be perceived.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe Alan Mortensen wanted to add something already for a long time. I'm sorry.
It might be slightly too late now, but I just wanted to comment on what you said, that of course government has a role and NGOs/government has a role, but I think still there are some countries out there now where you have enough GDP per capita to start saying, let's give the private enterprise a chance to supply some of those services that today are perceived or only governments can do them. I don't think that's the case. I think we live in 2017 where we can do things differently. I'm sure you somehow agree also, but it seems to me we've tried supporting these governments for so long now, ever since I can remember, and I'm having gray hair, as you can see. Nothing much where I can see that they can do it better than the private sector. There are, of course, regulation. There are plenty of places where they have to be in charge. But I'm still saying, I mean, these are some of these developing countries, at least, you know, that you got super entrepreneurial people who would love to run a private practice or run a private hospital or be part of any kind of things that's private compared to working for the government. But they are choosing the government because that's where the money flows.
But sorry, just saying quickly, my point was different. I was not arguing that we should have the governments doing everything. My point was that, let's say, the public has a responsibility to basically to make sure that resources are available for public health and health sector interventions. Yeah. And I think that goes more that we see a strong tendency, and to name some of the countries, the development aid in Switzerland is for the moment highly under debate. If the first budget round of savings comes possibly this or next year in the parliament, then one of the first areas where the funds will be cut, then it's development aid. The US, we have all witnessed the declarations and the friendliness of the current president towards the United Nations, but also towards PMI, which might also be then to the disadvantage of the Presidential Malaria Initiative, which then also might be to the disadvantage of Westergarten as an important funder. Yes. And so that was my point. And I think my point was that cannot be caught up by the private sector stepping into that responsibility. So that that was my point. Yeah. And to put it a little bit further, I think transfer payments are needed, and they are needed. We have them in Switzerland between the communes, between the cantons. We have them in Europe from the better off countries to the worse off countries, and we have them globally, and that's something which is needed. So. Again,
thank you.
A lot.
I'd like to use this opportunity to open up questions from the audience. We'll start again with Mr. Bigley, maybe.
It's an easy one. How to combine the progresses of medicine, healthcare, with the evolution of the costs, respectively prices? I'm absolutely aware of Novartis Access Program. I'm convinced about Nestlé intention to reduce prices and makes it accessible to the general public. However, on the other side, and I also believe that in preventive field you can do a lot. On the other side, it's an OECD statistics that the cost of medicines for the last year of treatment of a cancer in the US between the turn of the century and now has increased from $50,000 to $200,000 per patient. So 4 times. How, with that evolution of the costs, to reconcile with the ability to offer to developing countries, for example, affordable treatment, medicines, nutrition?
Who wants to start in the short?
Go ahead, please.
I think we have very clear tendencies. The business model promoted by those companies is price discrimination, offering certain drugs, certain treatments at different prices in a middle-income country than in Western Europe. And that will most likely also be the business model for the future. But up to you. I think you are know that better than I do.
I can tell you the price of a cancer patient who receives, for example, Boost, which is a medical nutrition for cancer patients, for people who have swallowing problems, etc. So that you get for a dose for 5 francs a bottle, 5 Swiss francs a bottle. I don't think this is going to contribute to your 200,000 Swiss francs, because that's exactly the issue. Medical nutrition, for example, is not being paid for usually by the health insurances. That is being taken care of by the consumer themselves, or it's in the food budget of a hospital. So Nestlé as a company, of course, is not in that game, that we have extremely expensive foods contributing to a bill of a cancer patient in the US. It is more the other way around. How can we make the food available for those who cannot afford it in third world country, in developing countries? That's more of an issue. And how can it get down there with, for example, alternatives, ways of distribution, maybe different ways of incentives being promoted or being provided by governments, etc. This is more of an issue for Nestlé rather than looking at the high cost of last year of a cancer patient treatment. That's what we're not in.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I think I should say something to this topic.
I think so too.
So true, yes. So honestly, I believe what a common pharma company of our size has to do is to deal with the topic of pricing in a very, very diverse way. There is surely not one answer how to do this well. And what we are trying to do in Novartis is really, we are trying to use a suite of portfolio of different kind of models that would allow us to address different affordability issues around the globe. And this can be something like Novartis Access, where we are providing these treatments at the price of $1 per month, including oncology treatments. You were referring to oncological treatments. That's part of this portfolio, of this package that we are selling. But then in other geographies of the world where you have a more well-established healthcare system, we need to talk much more about the value of the treatment, maybe also about the outcomes of the treatment, because then the costs that are within the system are much clearer to the system why they are as they are. So it's much more about articulating for the value and the outcomes that we are creating at the systems level. And then I believe we have a changed conversation about the prices of medicines, honestly. But there is not one answer in terms of this is the model that we need to use. We need to use a suite, a portfolio of different instruments in order to address affordability issues. That's the main message that I believe we need to convey.
Alan Morton? Yeah, just unless I'm completely wrong, but it sounds also like a lot of cross subsidies are happening, that you are making good money in the US and you're investing money elsewhere, and makes it super cheap to buy medicine where it's even more needed. And it's similar to what we do with our life store in the US and in Europe for outdoor people. We have a really tangible system where if you buy one of our products, one child in Africa gets 1 year of clean water. And we've got right now about 1 million kids on this project through various campaigns we're running like this. So it's really tangible, and that's a different way of doing it. I mean, you have a much more complex business model. This is super simple, but there are so many companies out there that can decide to be green, or they can decide to do other things. There's many ways to cross-subsidy and doing business and doing good that way. So you can take something from rich Americans, if it's $250,000 or whatever you were talking about, that you can then do a project in Africa. I'm cool with that, to be honest.
But maybe not Americans.
Okay, thank you. There was one more question in the back. Yes?
Thank you very much for this interesting debate. My name is Andreas Ulrich. I'm from the World Health Organization, and I'm dealing with non-communicable diseases for over a decade. And my question is about, within this amalgam of the SDG 3, we have non-communicable diseases, and we have also, and this is less known, agreed targets and indicators for the non-communicable diseases. Among these targets, which have been agreed by member states all over the world, there are 3 targets which I think I would like to put into the discussion. Reduce the consumption of tobacco by 30%, reduce the consumption of salt, and halt the epidemic of obesity. How the panel would like to address these targets and contribute?
I think that question most probably goes rather straight to Nestle. We reduce our salt further in our products by 10% up to 2018. So we established a baseline, and we do that in a very transparent way. So we have a system in place that is called the Nutritional Profiling System, where we check 1/3 of all our product portfolio every 3 years. So every product comes in a 3-year circle. And then we have to comply with the rules to cut down the salt, for example, in products that are considered to be salty foods. The same applies to, and we believe that we have it on salt, we have it on sugar, and we have it on saturated fatty acids in order also to curb the obesity epidemic. And I just was recently, The Guardian published recently an analysis of cereals on the market right now, and Nestle scored pretty well in the sugar content compared to other cereals on the market. And that would be a question back also to the audience is, what would be the incentives, for example, for a company that does and goes ahead cutting down sugar, risking in some way also eventually losing consumer because taste preference. We have to invest more because sugar is not only for sweetness, it's also for bulking agents. So a question would also be, what would be the incentives and smart regulations in order to allow companies to do that? For example, Nestle has together with Unilever and Danone, we have asked the EU Commission, and we're pushing hard for the EU Commission to have a nutrient profiling system being established across Europe so that they have this level playing field, what you discussed in the first session. It's not going to happen. And this would be for me one of, when we talk about the SDGs and the roles and responsibilities, what I would like to give back as a company is also where are the incentives and where is the political will to do and implement these measures so that we can play face to face with all the others, in particular the small and medium-sized companies.
You know, just to add a little piece, and that's clearly, of course, a main responsibility of a player like Novartis, which is in the nutritional space. But we believe that it also makes sense to think about nutritional preferences and diets in the context of most vulnerable patient populations that we are working with. Mm-hmm. So in our social business program, where we educate rural communities in some parts of the world, we also speak about healthy diets and good nutritional choices, because we know that if a chronic disease happens with them, then the impoverishing effects are, of course, specifically huge. And therefore, we say it makes sense to intervene with such an intervention there as well. Whereas, you know, in the big markets, I would say Nestle is in a much better space to address that, and it's much closer to the core business of Nestle. But where we see a need and where we have specifically to do with vulnerable patient populations, then, of course, we also bring these kind of things to the forefront and act on it.
Mm. Yes?
Me again, or for those who weren't there, Guillaume Crépin from Sdg Compact. So we are invested in Novartis and Nestle. So we are also convinced of the value of the initiatives you just discussed. And my question is, what have you done different in approaching these programs and implementations, mostly in developing countries, by phrasing your objectives as you did, so improving access to healthcare or access to nutrition, versus if you had an objective that would say, penetrate market X or penetrate market Y to this share of the market?
So you would like to know what is the difference?
Yeah, because I mean the phrasing of objectives as a meaning, it's important, and access to nutrition is not the same as I want to go in country X, but it could be seen as the same because in the end you're there present with your products and with a certain market share. So
I think one doesn't exclude the other at all. I think if you have a product, and I'm talking now a product that differentiates yourself from the others. I give you the example of infant cereals from the age of 1 year onwards, so that complementary feeding is recommended by the World Health Organization. When you have a product on the market that has a specific vitamin and mineral mix where you know through your own studies and studies we have done with academia that there are deficiencies in the countries, you're going to make a product that responds to it, and you want to have a higher market share in the country. It's exactly the creating shared value approach. I like that, because you have a higher penetration, you can maybe use the argument that your product is differentiating itself through the health value, and you create value for the society. So there is no exclusion of, on the one hand, having a higher penetration, on the other hand, doing something good for the society. On the contrary, I think that doesn't exclude one from each other.
Heterogeneous thing, the market, and that's very different, and that's very much about strategic choices, because suddenly you have to deal with different hurdle rates, margin expectations, incentive structures that you need to establish to bear these kind of different margins that you create in different socio-economic segments. That's very different to the past, where you said, we go for the top tier, that's all.
Thank you. Time is unfortunately up already again. I would like to conclude with a short round, please. I mean, we're 1.5 years into these goals, into this goal number 3 as well. We felt that there's a lot going on. Concepts are changing, partnerships are being built. What's, in your view, the most important thing that has to be done next? Just a short.
Try to make it
in
short.
order to, for us to achieve this goal by 2030.
Okay, very short, and it will follow on what you just mentioned. It is the necessity to move away from a pet project or a philanthropy project that the owner thinks is cool, and to really sit down and say, okay, how do we now take a hit on our profit margins, on our structure, how we normally do it? We always centralize, but we want to do something in Nigeria. How do we now do this? How do we really go there and make an impact? How do we put money in the pockets of those people out there? That will solve most of the SDGs, right? They have enough money, they solve most of these things. How do we do this? What's our role? How do we change for that? And I think we are on the way. I mean, 10 years ago, we would have been saying different things, right? We would have our structure from top to bottom and bottom to top. So,
thank you. Maybe even shorter, Michael.
Sorry.
So I think we have to become much more sophisticated along the lines that I just tried to describe, because that's really about business integration of sustainability or the Sustainable Development Goals. That's one pocket. The other pocket is public financing, specifically for non-communicable diseases, has to change, because here is where the big risk is for the global population, and the money is not where it should be. And I believe that's something that needs to change in order to really drive positive outcomes in terms of SDG 3.
Kaspar Wies.
First of all, the good thing about SDG 3, some countries have achieved already the targets because they are universal, and Switzerland has already done its homework. That to say a little bit, or not in all respects, but in some respects, so in terms of mortality rates and so on. I think what is needed in respect to the SDG, but more globally to all the SDGs, I think it's too broad spanning. So we need to, in a certain way, to get more concrete and to be more specific in some aspects. I think the SDGs, they are in a certain way too universal to, in that sense, I would fully support. Priorities have to be set, and for the moment they are not really here. It's everything. SDGs for the moment, everything.
Thank you. And your experience?
I will be very brief. I said it already, incentives from most probably the governments, international organizations, level playing field, and also incentives from the investors community. So I would very much like if the public here and others could influence also investors, that they keep and they have an eye on the companies that are good and complying with SDGs, who are high up in ratings, and that they get a favorable treatment also from the investor community. So I see here two incentive mechanisms in order to integrate it better into the commercial and the private industry.
Thank you very much. I think we are here in a common learning process, and I think we have gone a little step forward today, and I hope you are all now ready to take a lot more steps towards achieving these goals. Thank you for participating. Thank you for listening and also participating. I'd like to hand over now the floor to Ruth Blumer-Lahner, the President of Global Compact Network Switzerland.
I have the difficult task in 3 minutes to make a summary and closing remarks, which is not easy after your summary you just made. And I thought, please allow me a very personal remark. When I was a student, which is a little bit ago, I have some gray hairs. On one hand, we've been reading at the time the book of the Club of Rome, Limit of Growth. And on the other hand, of course, in all economic lessons we learned that the business of business is business, nothing else. This was 20 years ago. It's not so long ago. About 10 years ago, or 11, 12, I was with Ylva Stiller at the IMD, and perhaps you remember as well. We've been discussing during 2 days the business model of sustainability. And we had huge fight with CEOs saying, no, 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 there is no business model for sustainability. The business of business is business. And we had even more huge fight with NGOs saying, oh, doing good, this is us. Business and doing good, this is not your business. And now when we look what we had today, this is in fact fantastic. We went a long way in the last 20 years. I think we can all agree on that one. Of course, we can also all agree that we still have a long way to go. But we have good reasons of being positive when we see how the business and the other stakeholders has developed in the last 20 years.
I think what was interesting about the last panel discussion was what we saw from everybody there was just how complex the issue of partnerships is. And if I had to summarize the panel, I would say it really demonstrated just how complicated this problem is and how deep the challenges go. And it really brings out the need for partnerships in really achieving SDG 17 for Swiss companies. I think it can't be underestimated.
I think the take-home is that the Sustainable Development Goals are very challenging, that they have big goals and that we can only reach them if we work together, and meaning with companies, NGOs, governments and so on. And that's the only way to reach them and to educate people to know more about them and how to actually do something about it.
I really think the panel discussions were really interesting. I take home the messages from the people representing the companies. I think there's still a lot to do, but on the other hand, we learned today that companies are already on a good path. And we also learned that the cooperation between governments, for instance, and company must be strengthened and leads eventually to the goal of reaching the SDGs.
So I have three main key takeaways that I take from this conference. The first is that Swiss companies are really at the cutting edge of driving innovative solutions across the SDGs. And what I would say is that the ones that are achieving the greatest impact are basically embedding the SDGs in their core business. So whether it's Nestlé embedding it into nutrition products, or whether it's Westergaard embedding it into their flasks, companies are embedding it into their core business, and that's what's driving impact. My third key message is that partnerships are key to scaling up impact and touching more consumers and more people. And the Swiss culture and the Swiss companies present here today are all at the cutting edge of driving innovative partnerships.
I'm very happy that we could bring together so many people and very good specialists from different companies. And for me, the most important was we had really equality on SDG 17 and 3 on health, where we discovered new possibilities, but also lots of questions which are still to be treated. And for me, the most important finding is that we have to go on to develop together business, private sector, with public sector and civil society solutions. We have to develop them together. And we are only at the beginning of the whole thing. So after this day, I'm really motivated to go on with the work, because I see so many members of the United Nations Global Compact Network Switzerland, but also so many companies are engaged, and others are very helpful, also the Swiss government, to bring forward this agenda. So for me it's clear we have to implement the SDGs more and more, and Switzerland has to play an important part in the whole thing.